Hey guys, welcome to an install video. Today we're going to be taking care of installing the Samsonas Universal H-Pattern Dogbox. This can be put in pretty much anything, hence the term universal. Installation will vary slightly, but this will kind of get the general idea across of how to take care of installing this transmission. So without taking too much of your time, let's jump right into it. So to get this project started, you are going to need the transmission, some bolts, you're going to need some rubber hose for the vent, the bell housing to transmission adapter along with the slave, the Shifter Linkage kit, a welder, you can do MIG or TIG, I am doing a MIG, I'm using a Miller Matic 90, and lastly you will need the shifter. Okay, so motor and bell housing and clutch and everything are already in the car. So you need the adapter plate. I am running a LS T56. Already have, like I said, already clutch and everything is in the car. This is the T56 adapter plate. You don't have to run it, but I'm running the Tilson adjustable slave cylinder just because it makes installing much easier. You don't have to do the measurements and then try and find the right one. You just adjust it, the whole center shaft is threaded, rotation lock there, you have your feed line for the slave and your bleed line. It doesn't really matter which one on this is the bleed and feed, however, whichever one is the top of the trans, which will be this one, needs to be your bleed so that you can bleed the air out of the system. If you've never measured for a slave cylinder to go onto a trans, this adapter is a little weird because it has some different kinds of recesses. Basically, you're going to need to find this surface, this outer edge surface right here is what's going to mate to the bell housing. So you need to find the distance from here to the clutch fingers, and you need to adjust for this. So you need to have from here to the clutch fingers, you need to have a 0.175 inch air gap, which will allow your clutch to properly engage. But for the Samsonas, I'm going to install this onto the bell housing and motor first with the slave already installed on the adapter plate. I've already done all my measurements. Every setup can and probably will be different, so you'll have to take your own measurements. You need to test fit everything. I've already done mine and clearanced the trans tunnel. You can also build yourself a whole custom trans tunnel. I kept my stock one in. You have to make sure that these lines in the inside of the bell housing are not interfering with the clutch, which if you did all your measurements properly, you shouldn't have any issues. Line up this adapter plate. I had to order bolts for this, get what exact size they were, but again, I'll put those on the screen now. You're getting a few starter bolts threaded in. Now we have the adapter plate all installed, all the bolts in. Our through hole should see directly into the clutch. Now we will get the trans under here and bolt the trans up. The trans only uses 4 bolts to attach to the adapter plate. So we have one there, there, and one there. A quick overview on the whole trans we need to know. That's vent, so we use rubber hosing to vent that to wherever. Your drain plug back here, your fill plug on the driver's side. The removable input shaft will go in there, it's right there, and then your output is obviously back there. That's your shift linkage that we're going to be connecting the shifter to. Whole thing, I'm just doing the case, just a hair over 15 long, 7 wide, 10.5 inches tall. Very small package. Like I said, this will be bolting up to the adapter plate through matching holes on the sides. Let's get that under the car and mocked up. Okay, so while this may be much easier to do on a lift with a proper shop, I got this under here in the garage on 2x4s under the car. That way I'll be able to slip a jack under there and use the jack to lift it up into the car. Lay a old microfiber on it so I can jack up from there. Alright. As it's being scooted up, before it gets too far, make sure that you have the input shaft in the trans. So you should know which side is going to go where. This is the engine side, and this is the trans side. There you go. And it'll be pretty obvious when it stops, but just in case, it will seat all the way down. Okay, now that we have the input shaft in the trans, we can go ahead and attach it to the bell housing. Okay, so we're back. It took a little bit, but I put it in gear so I was able to kind of spin the tail shaft to also spin the input shaft. So once you have it kind of on enough for the bottom two bolts to thread in, get those threaded in, and then that'll help you line it up the rest of the way, because that was the biggest problem I have. And then once those are threaded on and like you can tell it's locked in gear, locked in with the crank, then you can kind of just wiggle it on from there, and then the bolts will help you seat it the rest of the way. Like I said, there's only 4 bolts that hold this trans to the adapter. So you got the 2 on the bottom and then the 2 on the top. Every vehicle and bell housing will be different, but there are quite a few holes on each for you to use. Like the bottom has 2 different options right there. The top looks like it has 3 options on each side, but just figure out which one works best for you. Obviously only one of them in each section is going to line up, and get those on, and then we'll be able to move on to fabricating the whole gearbox mount as well as the shifter. So I have cut up the mount that I got with my engine mounts, which is the ISR T56 mount. Kind of grinded this down and fabbed up some tabs to be welded on. This is kind of going to sit like right there, and then another one will be on the back side of here, and that's what the trans will mount to. And get this finished setting up and weld everything on, and then we will move on to welding brackets to make these fit back where they need to go, which is going to be right about here. Now we have the trans side and the car side. Now we just have to make that one piece and we'll be done. Alright, so this is kind of what we ended up with for our trans mount. Still drying a little bit, but it's not bad, especially not being a fabricator or anything. Now we gotta pop this in, secure everything up, and we can move on to the shifter linkage. Okay, now I have all of the mount set. The 2 trans bolts are in, and then the mounts and bolts are in as well. We should be able to drop this, and the trans will be happy. Alright, trans is in. Now we just get to move on to the shifter linkage, and that is it. So we're going to start with the shifter linkage. So the kit comes with 2 ends, so just weld one end on, clean it up, and then we'll use this end and we'll attach it to the trans, and then we can measure for the shifter. The shifter will need to be in the car, so you'll need to fabricate your own way it mounts. I have this plate that I was able to just thread into. So my shifter is gonna sit right about there. You're gonna need to kind of figure out where you want your neutral to be, where it wants to sit as far as forward, backwards. Alright, so my shifter is securely mounted to trans tunnel. Kind of just have to figure out a way to hold that, maybe somewhere like that. So that's about where I want my neutral. Go under the car and measure out the linkage. Okay, so this is the full linkage, and we're going to need to take the end that is secured, which is this end, and attach this to the trans. Alright, so the linkage is in the trans. They're connected. The trans is in neutral. You can test that. As long as you can spin this tail shaft, you are good. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to measure and connect the other end to here. So I have the trans side on the driver's side of the car, which means I will have to have this also on the driver's side of the car. So we're going to put this in here, wiggle it in, there we go. We want about center. And we're going to hold this up to where we want it and cut approximately. So we want this sitting about right here, and so we're going to cut this pipe probably about right here so that we can weld the rest of this down. We want our weld point on the linkage just after the bevel. Got this end cut. I just used a pipe cutter, but you can use an angle grinder if you want. Alright, now that I got that on, you will take this end and put this back in the trans so that everything kind of lines up. Now that we have that linkage set, figure out where we want our neutral at, make sure we're still in neutral, and then what you'll do to make your life easy is take a marker, hold this where your neutral is, mark, just press the marker in a good bit so that you both have a stopping point and a lineup line on your linkage. That way you know that that is where they need to meet up, and that's where you need to weld them together. Now that we have the marks, we can take everything out like this, and we'll be able to line up this mark right there and weld away. Alright, from there, this is the completed shifter linkage. Just test fit, make sure everything works right. Go through your shifts, make sure you can get into all your gears. If not, you may need to widen out your shifter hole, and then you will measure for your drive shaft. That should be pretty much everything, considering I don't really have any parts. Whenever you are going for final install, make sure you use your C-clips, your ring clips, these on the end of your linkage so that it doesn't fall out when you're on track. So this is how the trans sits in the car. It's the mount. So this is a LS240. It is sitting above the exhaust header tubes, and it is above the frame rails as well. So you don't really have to worry about clearance on anything because it will clear everything. Don't forget to install your clutch line, bleed your clutch, but that's different for every car. And that is it. That is how to install Samsonas 5-speed H pattern 4, 5, 6, whatever speed H pattern Dogbox on a LS in your garage on jack stands by yourself in one weekend. So off-season stuff. This I wanted to show that the shifter hole was able to be pretty much right where stock shifter is in the 240. So the bulk of the video was actually filmed way earlier in the year, or last year. I wanted to get a season of driving on my setup before I actually put out a video on it. That way I could actually give an honest review of my experience. I haven't had any problems with the transmission itself. It was really lightweight. The transmission shifted great all year. Put down the power. It felt very solid all the way throughout the season. Just keep them on normal maintenance with it. Like oil changes, your brand preference will be different. I run 75 W140 gear oil, and I've had really good success with that. If you're interested in picking up one of these to put in your car, I'll leave links and information in the description of this video. That's about it. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions that I may be able to answer, please ask them below. And if I can't answer them, I'll try to point you in the right direction of somebody who can. Thanks for watching.